You did.
Call the meeting to order for July 17th, 2012. Ms. Hibbs, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Ashley?
Here.
Dr. Daniels?
Here.
Mrs. Felter?
Here.
Mrs. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Poland?
Here.
Mr. Shear?
Here.
This evening we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask that after the Pledge of Allegiance this evening, we are all aware of the tragedy that struck the Olathe East and the Olathe community this week with the unfortunate accident of Nate Trinkle and his passing. So I'd like to offer just a few moments of silence after the Pledge of Allegiance for him and for his family and for the Olathe East community as a whole. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It was a sad day for us on Sunday, and I know it was for a lot of other folks. And it's kind of hard to go on sometimes, but it's what we need to do. So I know we have a lot of business to do this evening, but we certainly want to remember that family and the Olathe East community in our hearts and minds tonight as we go about the business of moving forward into a new year for the board. First thing on our agenda this evening would be the election of the board officers for the 2012-2013 school year. So the first action would be to elect a board president. First thing we do is we would have motions to name potential board presidents. So board members are free to do that now. And then when all the nominations are in, then we would need a motion to cease nominations and second, and then we'd vote on the cease nominations, and then we'd vote to elect the president. So it's a two-step process. First part of the process is to name potential board presidents, and then we'll cease nominations and then vote. So nominations for the 2012-2013 board president are now on the floor.
Mr. President, I would like to nominate Amy Martin.
I would need a second for that nomination.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, then I would need a motion to cease nominations.
So moved.
And I would need a second.
Second.
Thank you. So Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Ms. Ashley to cease nominations and a second by Mr. Shearer to cease nominations. So we would call the roll to cease nominations.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
No.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Motion passed 6-1. Then we would have a motion to elect Ms. Amy Martin to serve as the 2012-2013 Board of Education President.
So moved.
I move that we elect Amy Martin as president of the Olathe Schools Board of Education for the year 2012-13.
Okay, motion by Ms. Ashley. I need a second.
Second.
I'm sorry. Dr. Daniels, thank you. Motion by Ms. Ashley and a second by Dr. Daniels. Ms. Hibbs?
Mr. Poland?
No.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Ms. Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Shear.
Yes.
Okay. So Ms. Martin is elected to serve as as president of the Board of Education for next school year.
Thank
It's your
you.
gavel.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for your confidence in me. I also would like to thank Mr. Parker for his service this last year. The amount of time and energy he's given to his duties has been incredible. And serving with him, I think most people don't get to see how much work he puts into it, and they don't realize it because he does it with such grace. I also want to thank Harlan for the work he's done to create an atmosphere on the board where each of the members really feels that their input is welcome and that it's heard and that it's valued. And I will do my best to continue in that tradition. All right. The next thing we need to do is elect a vice president. So at this time, we would accept nominations for vice president.
I would move to nominate Dr. Deborah Daniels as vice president of the school board.
Are there any other nominations?
I think we need a second on that. Need a second? No, don't need a second. Okay, my bad.
I would move that nominations cease.
Is there a second to cease nominations?
Second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved by Mrs. Ashley and seconded by Mrs. Felter to cease nominations. Mrs. Hibbs?
Whoops. Okay, that's right.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mrs. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Felter,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Ms. Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Shear,
Yes.
Mr. Poland.
Yes.
See, the reason they give me the gavel is so I can just
I'll quit, I promise.
You might need a big one.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
And I have an elbow over here.
Okay, all right. Bad habit.
All right, now I need a motion to elect Dr. Daniels as
I
vice
would
president.
move to elect Dr. Deborah Daniels to serve as the 2012-2013 Board of Education Vice President.
I will second it.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker and seconded by Ms. Felter to elect Dr. Daniels as vice president. Mrs. Hibbs?
Mrs. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Felter,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Ms. Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Shear,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
No.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Dr. Daniels, congratulations.
Thank you.
And then now we have some standard business to take care of. We aren't looking at any changes to our clerk, deputy clerk, and treasurer. Is there someone who would like to make a motion?
I move that we appoint Mrs. Opal Hibbs as clerk of the Board of Education, Ms. Deborah Madden as deputy clerk of the Board of Education, and Mr. Merle Hastert as treasurer of the Board of Education for 2012-13.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Ashley and seconded by Mrs. Felter. Mrs. Hibbs?
Mrs. Felter,
Yes.
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Ms. Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Shear,
Yes.
Mr. Poland.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mrs. Martin.
Yes. On to the school attorney. Mr. Norris has asked to continue in his duties. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion to reassign Mr. Norris?
I'd move to appoint Mr. Michael G. Norris of Norris and Keplinger, LLC, as 2012-2013 school attorney.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Poland and seconded by Dr. Daniels. Mrs. Hibbs?
Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Ms. Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Shear,
Yes.
Mr. Poland.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mrs. Martin.
Yes.
Mrs. Felter.
Yes.
We will move on to the information and presentations portion of our meeting, and I believe Mr. Hutchinson has a presentation for us.
Good evening.
Time flies when you're having fun. It seems like I was just here a year ago. This evening, I'm here to discuss preliminarily our 2012-13 budget. We've been working, as you know, just 2 weeks ago, closed down the year, began the process of preparing our budget. I've been to Topeka, had the deputy's office review. Everything seems to be in order. We're just doing final touches and give you a high-level review tonight, and kind of kicks off the process that will culminate at the end of August. Going through some of the key assumptions that the budget's built around is we've built the budget around an increase of 425 students or 350 FTE. As you recall, FTEs are like kindergartners count as half or part-time students based on the hours of their attendance. We have a growth contingency of 450 FTE. As many of you recall, we always put additional students in our budget for a couple of reasons. One reason is in case we have additional growth that we didn't foresee, and to avoid republishing in that case. All of our funds can be republished, which means if we did receive additional revenue, we can ask the public for permission to spend those, except our levy funds. We have 8 levy funds that are basically trapped after we set the budget. So we always put this contingency in there, common practice for a lot of districts, so that there is room to grow in that budget. So what you're going to see tonight is a maximum budget that gets published to the public.
Mr. Hutchinson, that 450, is there a limitation to, could it be 550? Could it be 250? And does it make a difference on that?
It could be, there is no limitation. We actually decreased that, I think it was 2 years ago, we broke that and set it lower in order to maintain a flat levy. Overall levy, and actually got a little caught in a couple of our funds where we had a little spurt of growth, got us above that cushion, and was unable to access some state aid because of that. That's why we like to set it at 450. Seems to have always been pretty good for us.
Okay. So there is a slight levy implication, but once you get that set, and if we can live with 450, then every year doesn't bounce on you. You just keep that same contingency in there. Okay.
Correct. That's a really good point. If we set a levy too high, what really happens in most cases is that excess rolls to the next year and decreases that year's levy. So if you're always setting at 450, it really kind of is flat. There isn't any ups and downs.
Great.
We've budgeted around a 1.15% decrease in assessed valuation. Back in January, the assessor was projecting that we'd be up about 0.89. When we got our July report, we're really at a minus 1.15. There's been a significant number of foreclosures in the inner Olathe circle that have really devalued residential property, while apartments are up over 15%. So in balancing that out, it's slightly under. Belief is that we are finally at rock bottom. We won't see a race to the top at 10% a year, but we should start seeing that curving upward now. I think I've preached this a few times. The 5-year arms are through the system. He sees the county down at its bottom point and should start clicking upward in the years to come. We've built the budget around a base state aid per pupil of $38.38. That's up $58. As you know, the legislature had added $58 over our $37.80 of last year. However, that's still $562 below its high of $4,400 back in fiscal year 09. So we have a long way to go till we're back to our highest point. And finally, one of the assumptions is to try and, once again, maximize our capital outlay levy, but not at the risk of the overall levy. As you know, and I'll explain again in a few moments, capital outlay is one of the few levies you have a bit of control over, that it's not driven by some calculation. Just a quick look at our assessed valuation over the last several years. It's become a bit of a common theme. Our enrollment is the red line. It continues to grow, while our assessed valuation has dropped and now has remained fairly flat at that lower level. Where that becomes a bit taxing for us is take a fund like capital outlay. We're limited to 8 mills as high as you can go. Kids are coming, buildings need work, but you really can't keep pace with that growth because your assessed valuation isn't growing, so it's not generating more dollars for the same rate on the assessed valuation. When it drops, you got to increase the rate just to get the same dollar back from the year before.
Actually, it's decreasing the overall revenue because
it does.
With the valuation going down, and at 8 mills, it raises less money.
Absolutely does.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Base state aid per pupil in the last 5 years, as I said, we've seen that drop from 4,400, now we're at 3,838. If you take a look at a longer timeline of that, back to 92, 93, you can see we were fairly low levels, and then this spike you see is the lawsuit that occurred when the funding, legislature had to start putting more funding into our formula, and now you see it's really kind of declined back down to that level again. The legal maximum budget is really that threshold that we get capped at. As I've said several times, the state of Kansas has a really wonderful, equitable formula, and they try to get the same buying power behind every student wherever you live in the state, and they add some weightings to that. Based on that process, a legal maximum budget is calculated. And last year it was 217. This year it will be 216,870,000. So that threshold's dropping about $600,000. Now that figure is without that 450 cushion in. I want to talk about what's our real operating budget, what we're going to live by look like versus that published inflated budget. How is that happening? If we're getting $58 more, if we are growing kids, how are you not able to spend that money? Well, that 3838, that increase of $58 is getting us about $1.8 million next year in additional funds. The 350 growth that we expect will get us another $1.3 million. So far we're doing pretty good. But we have two major declining weightings in our facility realm. Our new facility weighting, we're losing $2.5 million of revenue.
Mr. Hutchinson, for the benefit of the public, could you explain that new facility weighting and why that's dropping off?
New facility weighting is you receive the students that go into attend a school within an addition or a brand new school, you receive additional dollars or weighting from the financing formula for 2 years.
And that's all local money? That's raised locally? Is there any equalization in that?
That is not that piece. The new facility really is not local money. It's a true weighting at the state level.
Okay, I
the next one is a local local one and is equalized. Extraordinary growth is our ability to go out and tax in order to help support that school or that addition until for 5 years as we grow into having that building online. That's a much lower decrease, only $461,000. The only caution I have on these two lines, in the next 4 years, we have about $7.6 million more that will go off of our rolls in varying degrees each year, kind of up, down. The peak year is about $3 million next year will flow out of extraordinary growth. In addition to that, with some of the ups and downs of the weightings or just adjusting budgets to get into that legal max, there's another $846,000 of reduced revenue or reduced expenditures in order to get down to our threshold of $216 million.
Before you go back to that slide,
certainly.
please. Just help me understand the emphasis of what you just said. $7.6 million over the next 3 years.
4 years.
Next 4 years that we're losing.
Regardless.
And that's going to impact us how, if nothing else happens?
If nothing else happens, we have to cut expenditures over the next 4 years by $7.4 million.
And how many new students do you anticipate we'll have in the next 4 years?
In the next 4 years, we're growing about 350 to 400 a year. So that would be about 1,000 to 1,200. And if 350 just generated 1.3, you see it doesn't quite close the gap.
Right.
Okay, just want to understand that.
We levy in 8 different funds. This schedule is just illustrating at this point where we see the levies. On the FY 2012 is what our last year our actual levies were, and the proposed rates for 2013 and any change. The general fund is statutorily set at 20, and that goes to the state to fund the funding formula. Supplemental general is decreasing about 2.2, and in a minute I'm going to go through these and then go one by one and explain some of the reasons why. Capital outlay, we've set at 7 mills. Last year it was at 8 mills. Extraordinary growth facility is slightly up, as is special liability. Cost of living is slightly down, special assessment slightly up, and then bond and interest is up 2 mils. I know many people, I drilled in everybody's head that we had this 1-year anomaly where the payments were going to be down and then they're going to spike back up. They're on the upward spike. The reason it doesn't go up 6-7 mils is, it gets a little complicated, but it's an 18-month budget. We only have to get 1/2 of the payment ready. It's the first 6-month principal payment is in that pipeline right now, so it's going up to next year. We'll be looking at 18 months of our highest bond payments, so it'll drive that levy back up to where it used to be. So we would expect to see more of a 4 or 5 mil increase next year in that realm, which will put pressure on that capital outlay levy if nothing else changes. Overall, that means the total tax levy for our patrons would go down about 0.24 mils. As I said, the general fund is statutorily set. The supplemental general, basically we have less assessed valuation per pupil and a lower proration factor in the formula. They're prorating us at a lower percentage, and we had a higher balance at year end. Remember where I said if you collect too much taxes, it just rolls to the next year? We have to assume be conservative and assume some low collection rates like 95%. If we collect 97%, we don't get to spend that. It rolls to the next year to decrease the levy. It's like paying the public back. So that normally we carry about 2-3 million over. It was 4 million this year. We had a pretty high collection rate, nearly 99%. Capital outlay arbitrarily reduced to 1 in order to try and keep a flat levy. Extraordinary growth facility, it's slightly up because of that slightly decreased assessed valuation in order to generate the same amount of money as we did last year. And this fund doesn't really change much in expenditure. We have to set it slightly higher. Special liability expense, the same thing. Special liability is for liability insurance premium, any litigation against the school district. Cost of living is slightly down. We have a lower cost of living percentage, which means our average home value has dropped, so it's closer to the state average assessed home value. Therefore, we don't look as rich or higher cost of living to hire teachers and pay teachers, so we get less weighting in the state's eyes. Special assessment, that is benefit districts that we participate in, and that's just need-based, whatever we believe the scheduled payments are. And bond and interest is once again need-based, and we are entering into our 2 highest payment years. Oh, excuse me.
I think that total is incorrect at the bottom.
It was, I apologize. I don't know why I missed that 1,000 times of going through it. That's last year's.
Could you go back just one slide?
Certainly.
One more.
Should be 0.24.
Would you restate what you said there? That in this times of increasing difficulties and lower valuation, we're actually decreasing a mill levy?
We are.
Did I hear that right?
We are. I don't want to take all the credit for that we are just purposely pulling that down. We would love to try and put some of those dollars in the classroom. That legal max pulls us down and mandatorily makes us lower our budget and spend less and find ways to cut because of those weightings that are falling off.
No, I wanted to express my appreciation for the fact that what diligent effort you've made to do that.
This slide just illustrates where we are relative, or where you are relative to your authorities. General fund is statutorily set at 20, so you're at the maximum. Supplemental general, we take full utilization of that, we're at our maximum authority. Capital outlay could go up 1 mil, and then you would be at your maximum, which is 8. We're at our maximum for extraordinary growth. Special liabilities driven by the need of the budget, and we've met that need. Cost of living's at its maximum, special assessment, and bond and interest are at their budgeted need. Therefore, the only place you could look to increase your levy is capital outlay. And obviously, any of them could be decreased.
And if we were to increase it, we'd be over our maximum budget.
Capital outlay is outside of that legal maximum.
Okay.
It's really covers the general operations. Capital outlay, its limit is 8 mils. Every 5 years, we ask the public to authorize us to go to the legal max of 8, in the state. At this point, the legal max is 8.
It would just put us over last year's total, is
Right.
what that would do.
Okay.
Correct. And it would be a slight increase in the overall levy.
Mr. Hutchison, for the purpose of the listening audience, could you let us know again, if we are levying 7 mills in capital outlay, what kind of money that would bring the district?
That would bring us a little over $11 million.
Thank you. Which can't be used for teacher salaries.
Cannot.
But could be used for all of those parking lots, air conditioners, chillers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, they could. Equipment, technology, items like that.
And some of the, am I correct that some of the salaries of the maintenance staff can be
They could be,
directed
yes.
into that?
Yes. Excuse me. Just this slide just illustrating the correlation between assessed valuation and mill rate. It's that explanation that as the reason the mill rate jumps in this graph is because you see the blue going down. It's an inverse relationship. AV drops to raise the same dollar you did the year before, you got to jump the rate up. It doesn't affect the overall tax payment. It's just you see on bills those rates going up and down when you see that volatile assessed valuation. That's why business managers love that nice flat line or nice steady progression. They like to see the lines moving the same directions.
Can you share the valuation, the split between commercial and residential?
I don't have that with me, but I could be happy to get that at our on August 2nd or at the workshops. I can definitely have that information for you. As I recall, commercial was barely up. The thing really offsetting our decline in residential value is the apartments at 17–19%. That was a huge influx of assessed valuation. Residential was down 10.
I would venture to say that most of those apartment owners are going to appeal that. They're not going to like that 15%.
They may not. But they seem to continue to build. There's a lot of permits that have been issued, so it must still be a profitable business. How will this show up on your tax bill? Because there's always a lot of confusion that one of the 3 lines is looked at, but not all 3 in conjunction. Unified 233 line is that 20 mills. It'll show no change. 233 school gen will show a decrease of 2.392 mills or down 6.5%. And bond will show that it's up 2.1 or 16%. Overall, if a patron were to look at all 3, it'd be down 0.3%.
Mr. Hutchison, I think when citizens look at their tax bill, they're going to see that 16.4%, so they're automatically going to say, you raised my taxes 16.4%. We need to be ready and proactive and telling our citizens that you have to look at the average of all 3 levies to come to the minus 0.3%. And I would hope that we could communicate that to the public very, very quickly and very often, because they're gonna look at that, and the first number they're gonna see is that 16.4%, and the phone's gonna start ringing and the emails are gonna start to fly. So I think it would be important for every board member to have this information ready at hand, so if we had a question, we could respond to that. And so we could talk about, and I'd like for you to go ahead and highlight that and send that to Dr. Berry so we could get that out to the board. So we'd have that as talking points when someone says you raised my taxes 16%. Because that's the number that they're going to focus on, because we did this a couple years ago when we had that big spike. The overall dollars that they paid out weren't increased, but when you look at the numbers on the percentage of increase in the mill levy, people just fall off the cliff.
It's very important to zero in on the rate also, because it's important to zero in on the rate, because if your home value for some reason did go up, the tax bill will, and I get a few of those phone calls too.
Which apparently didn't happen because they all went down
most of them have. Most of them have. I'd be happy to provide that, and it would probably be wise to update that in October when the tax bills go out, because that rate changes ever so slightly.
Right. And also, I think in October, we need to make sure that we have it on our website and have information out there so we could direct them to that site where people would understand that, no, your taxes didn't go up 16%. Actually, it went down 0.3%.
Correct.
Okay?
And I'd like an added emphasis to that on the fact that as valuation went down 1.15%, we followed that also somewhat. So make a correlation there.
What are our next steps? This evening, we're looking at the preliminary budget, and we'll be asking in an later action item for publication of the public hearing on August 2nd. That publication occurred this Saturday in the Olathe News. We'll hold a community workshop on the 26th at 6 p.m. Public hearing will be as part of your August 2nd board meeting, and we'll be asking the board to adopt the budget at that time, and so that it may be filed by the deadline of August 25th with the county and state. Just quick reminders, you're not approving the budget this evening. You're merely approving the publication of the budget summary, and that summary is a maximum. We, as I said, we add to revenue and expenditures, so it has a neutral effect on the levy, but each account has a little higher dollar, so if we are pleasantly surprised with growth and additional revenue, we have the ability to put that in classrooms. This is hard to see on the screen, but I'm sure you have it in your packet. This is the notice of hearing that details out the last 3 years' expenditures, our budget, and the levies that would drive that budget.
I had a question regarding the proposed mill rate for capital outlay, and you had stated that we would raise about $11 million with that mill rate at 7 mills. Are we then going to be satisfied with that amount of money to fulfill all of our capital outlay needs for 2012-13? Or have we compared this number with what we have in our priorities as far as those maintenance expenses that we have and some of the capital improvements that we have?
Although we've made great strides last year, our list would be much longer than what will be generated in that 1 year. So we'll be prioritizing those replacement cycles. Obviously, HVAC sort of takes better knock on wood, more of a back seat since we seem to be touching a lot of units this summer. But we still have huge technology needs, classroom furniture replacement, carpet, flooring, lighting, and then there are many other projects that could be used for capital outlay, could be used for in the replacement cycle realm.
So looking at the funds that are available to us in the 2007 bond issue and these funds here, where are we as far as what our priorities have been? We haven't reviewed that in light of what we're proposing in the budget for 12-13. Or at least I don't recall that we've reviewed that and what we can accomplish between those two sources, the bond issue and the capital outlay.
Depending on which list you want, in the walkthroughs we identified a much longer list of items that needed work in the buildings. Right. Where you draw the line on what you want to pay out of bond versus capital outlay, that list is $90 million before new buildings. So in prioritizing that, we probably need more discussion regarding, do you want to focus on that list more, or do you want to get into replacement cycles of furniture and items like that? But we have not done that part yet. The assumption was to try to keep an overall flat levy, maximize capital outlay, and then bring a new prioritized list based on board input, similar to last year as we get into the fall.
Another way I hear your question, Ms. Ashley, is that how do we feel about leaving 1 mill on the table right now with all the needs that we have?
Right.
And so, again, as John said, the needs are tremendous, and it's so much more than 1 mill would gain us. We felt the balance of trying to keep the mill levy stable for our patrons this year overrides that. You also had a good point that, yes, we do have additional dollars still in our aged facility money from the 2007 bond issue. But again, our needs are significant enough that the 1 mill wouldn't make that much of an impact. We're going to have to look to a future bond issue sometime down the road But as you also said, then this just means we'll prioritize as we go into this year.
Well, I just wanted to make the rest of the board members aware of that because it's not a discussion we've had here or in the construction committee. So I just wanted to make sure everybody realized that's what we're doing.
Based on what our mill levy was for capital outlay just in the recent past, a couple of years ago, 1.4 mills, we're tickled that we can have 7 and still balance with no increase.
But we have a lot of buildings.
We do. John's not tickled as much as I am, but.
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Parker's favorite saying, we've kicked a lot of cans down the road, and so having 7 mills in capital outlay will help us retrieve some of those cans that have been kicked quite a distance at this point.
And once again, credit goes out to our maintenance staff for doing what they do with what we give them. So I appreciate what they're able to do with that.
And I think leaving the 1 mill on the table, so to speak, it does let our constituents know that we realize it's difficult financial times for them. And we're not trying to get everything we can, although it would be pie in the sky nice to be able to take care of everything, or at least a good part of the list, you know. That's a kind of nod to the fact that, yes, it's hard times for everyone. So thank you for that. And then, Mr. Hutchison, you're not deceiving the public, are you, with this at all? Like I've been reading articles. I've had tons of articles forwarded to me that say that the school districts, school boards, administrators are deceiving parents and teachers. And I would say, based on my new knowledge, being here for a year, I never thought we were deceptive. I just thought it was very convoluted and difficult to read a budget. But we do budget workshops. You would meet one-on-one with parents, wouldn't you, to discuss? And you encourage that, right? The effort is not to hide anything. It's all very transparent.
It's very complicated, but very transparent. So I'd be happy to, if anybody wants to contact me, I can help explain it.
Well, thank you. I didn't think you were deceptive at all, but I wanted to make that very clear publicly. And then for those that are thinking of running for school board, which is wonderful to have people that want to run to have a transparent budget, but do we set how budgets are created for the state, guys? I've never had that conversation. I think that would be more with senators and representatives that make those decisions. Would you agree with that, Mr. Hutchinson?
I would agree. I work within the formula that's handed to us.
Okay. So just to clarify for anyone that wants to make a difference on how the budget is put together, it wouldn't be running for school board. It would be running for House or Senate. And I'll get off my bandwagon, but I've got a whole bunch of emails in my box. I thought, I'll just answer them all this way. So thank you.
And anyone who questioned our budget certainly could attend the budget workshop next Thursday, a week from Thursday.
6 o'clock.
Which case they'd be able to ask questions about specific items in the budget, why this, why that.
Correct.
You know, what do you use that for? Why do you have that amount in special education? And we'd be able to answer all those questions during the budget workshop.
That's correct.
Any more comments, questions for Mr. Hutchinson?
And we're publicizing the workshops on our webpage and newsletters and every possible way, right?
Yes, Mrs. Kolba has set a new goal of doubling again this year to 20, I think. So.
Good job. Thank you.
Maybe if we serve cookies,
Yeah.
get people out. All right, well, I appreciate your presentation. It is a lot of information to absorb, and I know every year some of it sounds even a little new to me because you just can't hold all of it in your head. I'm not quite sure how you do it, but I appreciate you putting this together for us. Okay, we have about 5 minutes until we will take our comfort break, so let's move on to our consent agenda. It looks like we have 16 different items. Are there any on this list that board members would like to pull out for discussion or for a separate vote?
Madam President, I don't particularly need these items pulled out, but I would like Mr. Hutchison to come back to the podium. And I had several questions in regards to 4.12 and 4.13. 4.12 is the petty cash. Mr. Hutchison, could you just, I know that in the past we've talked about this, but again, it's good for the board to understand every year what controls are in place at the building level to make sure that no monies are inappropriately disappear?
For such a large budget, we have very small petty cash funds. Buildings have anywhere from $100 to $200, depending on their function. Like any petty cash at your businesses is, you have to have a receipt to hand in. To get replenished, you have to submit all those receipts, and then we go another step at year end. We collect all of it in and start over. That's what this action is to reestablish statutorily. They end at the end of the year. We have to start new ones up and send out new cash. So it's a great internal controls there. Are
those accounts randomly audited by our auditor?
They are not. They're really audited internally every time a replenishment is requested. We're checking all of the receipts. The student activities are randomly checked.
So that'd be my next question on 4.13 is the student activity funds, quite a bit more money in those funds.
Correct.
And I think several years ago, at the recommendation of our auditor, that those funds had been accounted for in the buildings, but at the recommendation of our auditor, we brought those into the central office to be monitored and audited every year. Is that correct?
Correct. We're a bit unique among school districts that a lot of school districts, there's a checkbook at every school, and that's the student activity fund because it's raised by students for the students. We centralize all that. It's still their money. We're the custodians of it, but they go through our channels requesting payments made, so it just adds that layer of control.
So the central office is the one who's monitoring those
Yes.
student activity funds at every building?
And they're randomly audited as part of our annual audit.
So how many approximately? The auditor just decides how many they're going to audit?
They pick 4 locations each year and rotate through
and they're different.
randomly.
So each school doesn't realize, understand.
They don't know they're coming.
Though they know that there's a potential audit out there. Okay. So,
They just don't know till they show up at their
so
door.
in your professional opinion, do you feel like that our controls are adequate and in place to monitor these 2 funds?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Hutchison, would that also include checks that are received for purposes of fundraising events at the schools? Do those run through these activity
Yes,
funds?
they do.
And so we are monitoring those to make sure they're deposited in a timely manner?
Yes, the only funds that don't, because we need an arm's length separation, is Booster Club PTA funds. That's run outside of the school district. It is not our funds, and we keep kind of an arm's length on those.
And I believe at the direction of KSB Legal Counsel, that's a recommendation
Yes.
that they stay outside of
Correct.
it. Correct?
Correct.
Right.
On consent agenda item number 4.16, approval of investment institutions for fiscal year 2013. I just wanted to note to the fellow board members and to the public that the financial institution that I am employed by is listed on here for approval. I don't intend to recuse myself from this vote because we have a policy in place that should that financial institution ever be successful in bidding on idle funds, that all of the bids on that particular request would come before the board for the board to review, just as a matter of standard procedure. So I just wanted to state that to the public and make that known for awareness.
Are there any other items for discussion? Then I would entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda.
I'd move to approve consent agenda items numbered 4.01 through 4.16 as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Mr. Parker and a second by Mr. Poland. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yep.
The motion passes. And we timed this perfectly. It's now 6:45, so we will take a short comfort break and resume in this room at 7 o'clock. If everyone wants to take their seats, we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, but,
That's the one thing that I do.
the other grandparents. Yeah.
For lots, yes, for lots of reasons. Meeting up with people.
Next on our agenda is public comments. At each regular meeting, the Board of Education reserves limited time for individuals wishing to address the board. We request that individual speakers limit their comments to 5 minutes. The clerk will monitor the time and notify the speaker when the 5-minute time limit has expired. Please direct your comments to the entire board. If a response is appropriate, the president will respond or refer to another individual. In an effort to respect the privacy, we ask that speakers refrain from discussing personal complaints involving individual staff members or students. Those speaking are advised that public comments are videotape recorded for broadcast on the district's educational access channel and audio tape recorded as a matter of public record. Individuals addressing the board should come to the podium at the front of the room and state your name and address. Mrs. Hibbs, I don't have record of anyone putting their name in. If there's anyone that would like to take a moment to make public comment, we would listen to you right now. All right, seeing none, we will move along. Next on our agenda is action items, bids, contracts, and agreements. The first one, 5.01, is a wireless hardware bid.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Due to a conflict of interest, I am going to recuse myself from this action item, and then I'll return for 5.02.
Excellent, thank you. Mrs. Hibbs, do you want to let the record show that Mr. Scheer left the room? Is there any discussion?
Madam President, I do have some questions in regards to 5.01 and 5.02. And Ms. Lyon, I just would like to direct those questions to you. My first question in regards to the wireless hardware, how did we decide which schools we were going to, first of all, why? And which schools and why did we choose those schools?
We chose these schools because they were the first schools that we installed the wireless network on to begin with. We started with that pilot at Olathe Northwest, moved out to the next 3 high schools, then down to the middle schools and down to the elementary. So as we go back with the replacement cycle, we'll follow that same pattern because that's the oldest hardware. Why are we doing it? Higher density wireless access points, meaning that you can connect more wireless devices per access point.
Like iPads and smartphones.
Absolutely. We are preparing for a bring your own device implementation in the district. Now, we're not quite there yet. There's some administrative
bring my
decisions.
iPad to the board meeting?
Yeah.
Hey, and get connected?
And get connected.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Would that include students bringing their own devices?
Yes, and there's some administrative decisions and discussions and conversations that need to happen before we actually implement that. Decisions like, are you just going to let all 28,000 students bring whatever wireless devices that they want to bring? What does that do to classroom management? Those kinds of things. So there's some discussions that have to happen around that, but certainly we are preparing the network for that because we know that we need to get there. We need to be able to do that. So that's why we're upgrading. That
sounds very admirable. I would like for us to make sure that we involve parents and the public in general in that discussion and say, this is what we're thinking. So when we introduce it, it's not a surprise to the public, and then everybody understands that's a path that we're going down, and we start having that discussion with parent groups, site councils, and such as that.
We hope to have the hardware and all the infrastructure ready at the latest by the end of this school year. We'll be seeing some more things.
For all the schools?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So all the schools are going to get updated this year?
We hope to have the wireless network updated by August of 2013.
That would include all the schools. So that's our plan. So every school would be updated with the new capability by the year from now, basically.
Right. So you'll be seeing some more.
Do we have the money to do that?
Well, that depends on what you approve for capital outlay for the coming years.
Okay.
But that's our intent. And, of course, that's dependent on funding, and we'll be bringing bids back to you throughout the school year. It's a 3-phase process. The next phase will be the middle schools and a few of the larger elementaries, and then the last phase will be the rest of the elementaries and the support buildings that have wireless access.
So that would include this building.
This building was actually one of the very first implemented with the high schools, so this building will get upgraded in that first round.
Okay, very good. That's good, and I think that as we get ready for our next newsletter, maybe that would be an item that we would like to make sure that the public understands that we're staying cutting edge as regards to wireless technology, because that's the wave of the future. Then my next question is on
Mr. Parker, can I stop you for a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
I think we should wait for Mr. Scheer to return to the room before we discuss.
Okay, sure. Let's call a question on that. Very good.
All right. So if there are no other questions, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the low bid from JMA Technology Solutions of Overland Park in the amount of $459,900 as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Hibbs, it's been moved by Mrs. Ashley and seconded by Mr. Parker. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Belcher?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Parker.
Thank you. Ms. Lyon, again, in on 5.002. So we're replacing some old desktops, I take it? Even though we just approved wireless, do we still need desktops?
Absolutely.
That's what we do most of our testing on?
I would say the majority of testing is done on the desktops, and then they use the laptops for other purposes during that testing window. We know that even though wireless has come a long, long way, and it's very reliable, the most reliable you can get is a hardwired machine. So all of the classrooms, the teachers' machines are all hardwired because they're into the digital projection equipment. All of the computers that are in the offices, most of the library media centers, those are all desktop machines, and they just have more power and sustainability than a laptop.
So what do we do with these old computers?
We have a company that we work with, Synetics, that's here in Kansas City. We've worked with them for a very long time. They come in and inventory all of the equipment that we're disposing of, meaning they take the make and model and serial number and asset tag off of the machine so that we have record of what we're disposing of. They wipe the hard drive completely clean. They let us take anything out of the machine that we could use for parts and repair, perhaps memory, video cards, whatever we think we can possibly use for repair and replacement of equipment that fails. They then come out to the site, shrink wrap the machine, pallet it, and take it off site, and they dispose of it according to the federal EPA guidelines. They do this at no cost to the district. We do not pay them a cent for this equipment. Your next question might be, well, do we get any money back out of that equipment? In years past, when we were on the 5-year replacement cycle and we did have a few pieces of equipment that might be worth something on the resale market, we have seen some money back. But right now our equipment is, after it's been sitting in a lab or a classroom for 6, 7, 8 years, it really has no value on the resale market.
And that brings me to my last question, and in regards to our replacement cycle. So how far behind are we in regards to the replacement cycle of our desktops?
We started last school year, the FY12 fiscal year, last year, 6,500 machines that were aged out. During the course of this past school year, you approved a bid back in December or January, I believe, for about 3,400. We're asking for another 775 tonight. So that gets us up to 4,100 of those machines that have been replaced. So we still have about 2,300 that are still beyond the 5-year replacement cycle. And remember, that's just computers. There's lots of other technology equipment that we need to replace in that replacement cycle: projectors and document cameras and switches and routers and servers and scanners and printers and our food production technology with their point of sale machines. So we're just talking right now with desktops and laptops. So we're still about 2,300 behind, and keep in mind that another 2,600 are going to come in to that beyond the 5-year replacement cycle this school year. So we're still behind, but we've made significant progress. And we decide what's going to get replaced based on the age of the machine. It's not, we're going to go do all of Olathe East. Because as you can imagine, those machines didn't come into Olathe East at all the same time. So we replace based on the age of the machine.
Okay. I hate to ask this question, but I need to ask it. It comes back to our capital outlay again. So are we going to have enough money this year to be able to put a dent in that 2,300?
Yeah, this is very helpful to hear the news that we might get another 7 mills. Of course, we share that with the Operations Service Center and all of the maintenance on the buildings, but it's very good news. We will try to be very conservative with that, thinking that the following year or two we may not be getting that. So we'll be as conservative as possible because, as I said, in addition to desktops and laptops, we also have all the infrastructure, the servers, the routers, the switches, there's just a lot of it. So we kind of ration out those dollars and keep us moving forward as much as possible.
Thank you for that report.
Are there any other questions? Then I would entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the low bid from Riverside Technologies in the amount of $558,990 as presented.
Second.
Go ahead. Mrs. Hibbs, we have a motion by Dr. Daniels and a second by Mr. Poland. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Next item, we move into our other action items, 6.01. All of us received a rather thick packet with professional counsel policy revisions. Dr. Berry, do you have any comments to make about this?
Well, again, we appreciate the fact that you allowed us to deliver that to you. It's just, in our opinion, it would be more difficult to look at something like that electronically because it was so thick. Again, this has been a year-long study during professional counsel led by Dr. Banikowski and Kaylin Kendall to just look at our policies that are part of the negotiated agreement. Again, thick packet, but it really comes down to most of it was just wordsmithing a little bit, updating to reflect current practice. There was very little change in those policies. A couple of them that are highlighted there, about 2/3 of the way down that summary page, where the content did change a little bit. And one was to clarify a little bit the use of facilities by staff in the district if they are, for instance, tutoring for pay. And so that cleared up that policy and is a little bit of a change. And then the same way in terms of the daily leaves for all employees. Didn't add any additional days, it just clarified how you can use them. In this case, we have always had 1 day that you could use for funeral leave for somebody outside the family. That doesn't work for us really in today's day and age, unfortunately. And so that was clarified again, that they have a little bit more flexibility, but does not change the total number of days. So those are the two pieces that really were changed. Everything else has just been cleaned up a little bit.
Are there any questions, comments?
I'll have to admit that because of the late delivery of the packet, I won't say late, but the 11th versus now, I did not, because of travel time, did not have a chance to read it all. So would you elaborate on the use of facilities by personnel, please?
Sure. This clarification came up because most school districts have a policy that will talk about tutoring for pay. And in our district, it's been pretty clear that we do not tutor our own students for pay, if that makes sense. Meaning if you're a 4th grade teacher, you're not going to tell the parent, bring your kid back after school or in the evening and you can pay me some additional and I'll teach that student. It doesn't happen that way in our district. But there are instances where let's say a middle school student struggling in math and they felt comfortable going back to their elementary school to maybe visit that 5th grade teacher that they had math from to get some additional help. Or in the case of some teachers, we have some teachers that just do some tutoring of off-grade students, wherever that might be. This policy just cleaned it up that it says it's not on school facility. It's not happening at the schoolhouse. Now, that brought in, this was more complicated because then it raised the question, well, what about coaches? Coaches accept dollars to tutor kids, in terms of camps and so forth. Well, a couple things came into play. Basketball coaches are not getting paid to tutor their center later after practice on rebounding skills. Does that make sense? It's still all part of what they do as part of their responsibility. But the camps are scheduled by Kansas State High School Activity Association and regulated to be in the summertime. It is regulated. It says you can charge a fee. They get a T-shirt for it. They, get whatever it might be. And our coaches instruct kids, whether it be, could be a music camp, it could be band camp, it could be athletics. So that does happen in our district. So we had to kind of see what we needed to do to balance that. So the policy says it falls in line with facility rental. So if you're a teacher, we don't like the practice of you tutoring your own kids or tutoring kids for pay at school. But if you wanted to have an academic camp similar to an athletic camp, you could go through facility rental the way our coaches do, rent a classroom space. It goes through the school, has to be recognized so that it's controlled that way. So there are some ways that we try to equalize that, if that makes sense. I will tell you, our teaching staff that do things like this in the summertime or extra hours, they're not in it for the additional dollars. By the time they get done with everything they do and buy the t-shirts and do all the stuff, I mean, it's a break-even deal, if that. But we wanted to make sure we could clarify it in policy.
And just be sure I understand, we're not saying they cannot tutor.
That's correct.
Just not on school grounds.
That's correct.
Okay, so, thank you.
If there are no more questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Well, I move to approve the GB policies for the negotiated agreement along with the minor edits in the GA policies as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Mr. Scheer and a second by Dr. Daniels. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
The motion carries. 6.02 has to do with our meeting dates and times. Is there anyone who has some discussion or would like to possibly consider changing our meeting dates or times? Then I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to adopt a resolution to establish 2012-2013 regular meeting dates, times, and locations per Kansas statute as presented.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Mrs. Felter. Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Motion carries. 6.03 is board representatives to the Head Start Policy Council, Olathe Public Schools Foundation, and the Kansas Association of School Boards Governmental Relations Network. If board members wouldn't mind, the people who served on those committees last year or in those positions last year, if you wouldn't mind making a few comments about your position so that other board members will understand the role, and then I will ask for volunteers.
Great. I'll start since Head Start Policy Council is the first on there, and I served this year and loved it. It's amazingly great. I'm willing to serve again. If anyone else wants the opportunity, I will gladly share the role. You meet about once a month with the Head Start Policy Council, which is comprised of parents and at least one teacher, and then leadership at the Head Start organization. It's all by statute, and it's amazing. It's life-changing for the families involved. You see people coming straight from work and painting clothes, and they've got paint on their hair, and they ran right there to participate, and you hear the kids out on the playground playing, and I'm a firm believer that it's a quality program and enjoyed being a part of it. But definitely it's such a good experience. I feel like anyone else that would want to have the opportunity should speak up and let me know so I don't just take over.
Are there any board members who would care to fulfill that role?
I would fight you for it, but I don't think they'll let me do it again. So.
You maxed out, huh? Mm-hmm.
I also did it one year and found it very rewarding.
It's really good.
All right, well, Ms. Felter, we will put your name down. And
Next on the list is the Public Schools Foundation Board, and I was proud to serve on as a representative last year. I don't know what you can say about the foundation, what an exciting thing they do through raising money through the golf tournament, through the the Grow Your Own Teachers, the summer school scholarships, Jamie, Christmas, they do so much for our community here. It's a very rewarding place to serve, and I would be happy to serve the second of what they said was my 2-year term.
Are there any other board members who are interested in serving on the foundation? All right, Mr. Poland will continue to serve on the Olathe Public Schools Foundation Board. And finally, the Kansas Association for School Boards Governmental Relations Network. And Ms. Ashley, I believe, served last year.
I did, but I think I got so caught up in the board of directors that it all kind of flowed together. So they just meet a couple of times a year, and we actually get reports of the board of directors about what goes on in there. So,
And that is mostly federal
yes,
government. This is not
yes,
local.
that would be correct.
It's some federal and some state. And given that Ms. Ashley is serving on the KSB Board of Directors, which is a really busy job, I'd be willing to take that responsibility to serve on the Governmental Relations Network, if Ms. Ashley would acquiesce.
I would be delighted.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Parker has volunteered to serve on the Governmental Relations Network Board. With those 3 names in mind, would anyone care to make a motion?
I would move to appoint Ms. Felter to serve on as the 2013 Head Start Policy Council Board Representative, Mr. Poland to serve as the 2013 Olathe Public Schools Board Representative, and Mr. Parker to serve as the 2013 Kansas Association of School Boards Governmental Relations Network Board Representative.
I'll second.
All right, Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Mr. Parker and a second by Ms. Felter. Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes. Motion carries. 6.04 is the publication of our budget. As a reminder, we are not voting on the budget, simply the publication of it. Is there any discussion or comments? Then I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve the notice of hearing for publication in the Olathe News on Saturday, July 21st, 2012.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, I have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Dr. Daniels. Would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Shear?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Felter?
Yes.
Our future action items, we have 4. Remind me what PMZ stands for. Penthouse, multi-zone, air conditioners installation. We voted, we're talking about the installation in the future, not the purchase.
That's correct, the installation of the full units.
Okay. We also have our agreement for athletic trainer services in conjunction with the Olathe Medical Center, a new policy, our Children's Internet Protection Act policy, and instructional materials for our Compass Learning. Well, actually, it's called Compass Learning for Alternative Education Sites. Are there any comments?
Ms. Martin, and this is directed to Dr. Berry. Dr. Berry, on 7.03, the Child Internet Protection Act policy. This is one of those things that I really appreciate staff taking the initiative and making a stronger policy. In other words, really put some monitoring and supervision and disciplinary measures in place. So this is one of those quiet things that we do, but it's huge. It is so important to the community for all of our parents to understand and appreciate the length that we go to in order for us to protect their children against any inappropriate activity on the internet, either by students or by staff. And this is just one of those pieces that somehow we need to make sure that we communicate this to our parents, that there's a sound policy in place, and I'm sure that it's communicated to staff, so staff understands the repercussions that are involved for inappropriate use of the internet according to our policy. And somehow we just need to communicate this to the public.
Maybe the
parents.
newsletter?
I'm sorry?
Maybe the newsletter?
Maybe the newsletter. So, because, I mean, it is so strong and it is so wonderful, and it's something that we overlook, and we just take it for granted, but you just can't take it for granted because we have to have appropriate policy in place to be able to enforce to make sure that the policy's in place and procedures in place to keep that kind of stuff out of our schools.
Very pleased with the extra work done. Dr. Dugan, Rita Lyon, Scott Mason, a number of others that put some special time in it, so it's a very strong policy. And again,
I feel so strongly about this that I would like to see a presentation by staff next week talking about this, so we get it out to the public and so they know what this is and that we've taken those precautionary steps, proactive steps to prevent it from happening in our schools.
we could do that.
Thank you.
You said next week, you meant next month.
I'm sorry, next month. It almost is next week. So, or the next board meeting.
All right.
Next two maybe board meetings
Yeah.
Okay.
in the near future.
Yeah.
Would that be all right?
Right, okay.
It's
Thank you.
quick turnaround for staff with lots of things going on right now, but we can do that.
Thank you.
Just going along with that, in the item number 5 on that is measures designed to restrict minors' access to materials that may be harmful to them. I would appreciate a, definition of what what that entails. Because I remember early on in my board meeting or board tenure, we had discussion about of mice and men. And there's a lot of stuff of mice and men that probably would not be accessible, that would be not permissible through the internet, but yet we allow, those things to be accessed into the classroom. So I would just like to see a designation of how those two things correlate, so.
Mrs. Martin, I had a question about 7.02. And I see that Lane isn't here, but maybe Dr. Berry can address this. This is not an area in which I am knowledgeable, but it seems like we have continued growth in the numbers of students participating in athletic activities and competitions. And when I look at the number, which I believe is it 3.5 athletic trainers, I think is that even remotely enough in the big scheme of things to make sure our student athletes are safe?
I think so, but I think it's something we can have Lane come back again, give you a full report on that. But I think we think it's what we can do right now. It's just like, unfortunately, and I'm not whining or crying, but it's like not enough librarians, not enough counselors. It's just that where we find ourselves right now. But this is a very important piece, obviously, safety of our kids. So I think we still feel we're adequately covered.
Okay.
And it's worth mentioning that we have a great partnership with Olathe Medical Center, who is picking up, I believe, half of the cost of the program.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, the board members received written information, a construction change order, which we hadn't seen in quite a while. It was kind of a surprise to open my packet and see that, but it was good news because we are saving money.
That's right.
And then
I have questions about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Greg, could you explain to us why we decided to change from cast or precast concrete to what basically block walls? And how that will affect the aesthetics, and are they going to be covered?
EFS is not a block wall. EFS is exterior installation of finish system. It's sort of a man-made stucco. Okay. We have it on several of our buildings, Chisholm Trail, Prairie Trail, California Trail. So it's an exterior material. It's not block. It's a insulation system with a finish over the top of it that is a man-made stucco look. We made the change primarily because it was $31,000 cheaper. Cast in place precast concrete just on bid day was more expensive than we had anticipated it being. This was a product that we had discussed using. Aesthetically, we have it on buildings in the district now. We use it on all of our new elementary schools. Most people don't know that it's there, but it's basically a stucco system. The appearance will be the same, and in my opinion, better, because it's more uniform. Precast concrete has flaws and voids to it. So it's a much less expensive system, provides the same amount of insulation, as we have before. And it's not the whole building. This is just a part of the building. It's everything below 9 feet in the back of the building. So very little of it would be seen by the public. Most of it is in the automobile, the project vehicle storage yard.
So the concrete block walls we're seeing going up will not be identifiable?
You will not see concrete block from the outside of the building anywhere. There is either a metal panel system or this, if you remember the terracotta rain screen, which is a brick-looking material, or EFS will cover all of the concrete block that's going up now. That's just the basic structure.
Okay. Thank you.
And 8.02 is really just a notice for the board about a facility rental agreement that we're entering into. Dr. Berry, would you like to make a few comments?
Yeah, we don't typically bring rental agreements to the Board of Education because we have a board policy that allows for the rental of our facilities by our public, which is a very positive thing. This one happens to be a little unusual because it is Mid-American Nazarene University requesting to rent our district stadiums, which again is allowable by our policy. We have costs already set in place for that. Unfortunately, they are experiencing some problems with the bleachers being unsafe on campus and don't have enough time to replace those, so they have asked about hosting their 4 fall home football games at our stadiums this fall. We've involved staff, talked to a lot of people, and so we're finalizing plans that we'll be able to do that and allow them to rent that facility and hopefully not have any impact on our high school games. Again, this is not a situation where we make any money or any profit off of it, but we also are not subsidizing in any way Mid-America's home schedule. We are recouping all of the costs that it will take to put the field back in shape to remarket for the high school game versus college, the extra watering it might take, some extra personnel to take things and get them turned around on a Saturday afternoon, et cetera. So we feel pleased that we can not tickled, but pleased that we can work with Mid-America and help them out as a partner.
Mid-America has been nothing but supportive of our school district. They are good neighbors. I'm happy that we can do this.
And it's worth noting that all 4 games don't necessarily need to be played at the same facility. It might just be.
We have some flexibility if we wanted to split them, but we also have some flexibility. In fact, I think their last regular home game is after our regular season is over, so we're down to playoffs at that point. But we think it's very doable that we can work it out.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is topics for discussion, where board members can bring up any topics they wish. Does anyone have anything they'd like to address tonight?
Well, one of the things I'd like to bring up, and it goes into the accordance with the budget and everything else, and you'll have to correct me on when we did this, but we went back and we looked at the bond and interest, and we refinanced that some years ago, and it was for savings at that point. With some of the changes that we have and the challenges that we have, again, I don't know what is the process now to go back and review that. Is that something that we do in a meeting? Is that something that you could bring to the board and say, okay, is this a time to look at it? Knowing, as you mentioned, rates are about as low as they'll ever be. Is this an opportunity for us to do some refinancing at that point?
I would say the Finance Committee would be a great starting point, and we were gearing up to discuss that and the need for an additional sale sometime next year. So the timing's perfect.
Okay, good.
Any others? I have 2 quick comments I want to make. I serve on the Kansas Association of School Boards Legislative Committee, and we get together every year to help KASB establish their legislative positions. We had our first of 3 meetings this last weekend, and I just wanted to share a few things that came out of that meeting. There are representatives from districts across the state, and as you can imagine, our makeup varies widely, and our needs vary widely. However, we always find that there are several things that we do agree on. And so this year we are focusing on a few key messages and goals, and I just want to read these to you really quickly. Kansas public schools have continuously improved student outcomes with nationally high-ranking achievement at consistent, reasonable cost. We can't let up. Students need to reach even higher levels to be ready for success in college and careers. And Kansans need to compete with the best educated employees, innovators, and leaders in the world. To be successful, we need clear expectations, stable and adequate funding, and to build on what works for Kansas and in each community. And the three goals that we chose to focus on are continue to improve educational outcomes by raising standards for districts, schools, educators, and students, provide constitutionally suitable funding for educational improvement in all districts, and to strengthen responsiveness to parents and community needs under locally elected boards and school leadership. And one of the topics that came up that is of interest to all of us is that we are continually asking for improvement from our students and our staff, and that perhaps as board members we need to look at improving, and we're considering adopting a position that school boards would choose a matter of or a means of self-improvement, whether that's a book study or a workshop, something like that. So just a heads up that might be coming your way. And then finally, I just want to remind the public and fellow board members that we do have a primary coming up. We have a lot of candidates who have some very different ideas about school issues, and I would encourage everybody to look into those issues and into the positions of candidates and vote. Advanced voting starts tomorrow by mail and in person next Tuesday, the 24th. The polls are on August 7th, and a new rule this year, you must bring your photo ID when you go to vote. And that's all I have. So unless there's anything else, Dr. Berry, do you have some comments for us?
Well, my comments obviously will focus on the start of school. We are 21 business days away from inviting the kids back in. And so I know things are starting to get exciting in our buildings, and actually exciting at home, I think, as parents get excited about maybe sending their kids back to us as well. We welcomed all of our secretaries back today. We had them for lunch. That's put on by Main Street Credit Union. It's a way to recognize them and get the year kicked off. We meet with custodians on Thursday. Our administrators will all be in training together next Wednesday, the 26th. And of course, registration is happening on the 26th as well. So things are really starting to happen, as I said. It's an exciting time, and it's also, I'm always so pleased that kids are excited to come back to school. Got a call today, and this is one of those ones that I feel bad about. A couple that has moved in from Michigan, bought a new house in the Olathe city, but unfortunately they're in Spring Hill District, and they're wanting to know what they can do to get into our district. It's that time of year right now that we handle those transfer questions and move-in questions and so forth, so things are going to gear up pretty quickly. As has already been mentioned, we're excited to share with the public the budget hearing or workshop, we call it July 26th at 6 p.m. It really is a time that if somebody wants to come and literally in small groups or stay afterwards, they can ask questions and get things answered in terms of our budget that's being proposed by the Board of Education. As Amy mentioned, it is the political season, and I've also met with a number of candidates who have reached out to the school district. They are always interested in getting a little information so that when they go out to forums and the debates and so forth, that they can have information that they'd like to share. Important to note also, we have a number of our employees, and particularly principals, who get asked about maybe endorsing certain candidates or how they feel a stance, that they might take on something. Brent Yeager did a little work for us today, and we reminded all of our staff members in terms of what those guidelines look like. They certainly do not give up any rights as an individual citizen in our community. They can certainly choose who they want to and support who they want to. They can just not do it in a capacity that says Olathe principal. And so we made that very clear to them today, just as a reminder as we go into this. I also had made note about making sure everybody knew about the requirements for the photo IDs, because that's really something different. And there's a number of ways that you can comply with that, even including a passport. Students who are in college can use their post-secondary ID, but there are a number of ways you can do that. Also of interest, and getting more and more interesting to me every year, persons 65 or older can use an expired photo card, which I thought was really interesting. And there's also some ways that you can opt out of that. I want to also announce tonight and share something that Maggie Kolb's been working on with the Communications Committee, that's the Board Communications Committee, is that we are changing the format of our school newsletter. We're not only changing the format, we're going to produce it more frequently with a greater circulation, so it'll have a new look, and to boot, it will be less expensive. So we're really excited about that. So it'll be a nicer format, going to almost 50,000 homes instead of 30,000 But anyway, some nice changes that are going to happen with that, and we're excited. I want to also mention one more thing that does not happen anymore at this time of year, but this will be the third year that we've not had a district convocation. It was always a big event where we would come together with staff members and community members to kick off the start of school in our community. It was a nice event, a lot of excitement, wonderful talent and performances. Mr. Parker danced one year, in fact, but it was always an exciting time, and then a short message from the superintendent. But due to budget reductions, this will be the third year we've not done that. I'm fortunate that with our staff and the talents they have, we're able to produce a very short convocation video. So we keep it alive in terms of a message that I deliver, and it's shared then with all faculty members when they return to their buildings, and it's shown that way, and much more efficient and a big savings for us. So that would be my comments tonight.
Are we able to do team building type activities to keep the district somewhat as a family without the convocations?
You know, that was the big time that we brought everybody together, because when you're talking even at numbers that are smaller now, over 4,000 employees, it's difficult to have the picnic and bring your family and some of those things. So no, we really don't have anything else in the district that we do totally together.
I am glad to hear that we're doing a video, though, because I think it's important that staff kick off the year with a message from the superintendent. There's usually a theme or a focus for the year, and so we can still continue a lot of those traditions just without holding the actual event.
Trying to keep a placeholder that maybe someday things will be better.
Thank you. Dr. Berry, I believe we need an executive session this evening.
Yes, I'd like 30 minutes, please.
Mr. Parker? No? Okay. 30 minutes? All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'd move that the board adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel, to discuss matters relating to employer-employee negotiations, and for the purpose of preliminary discussion relating to the acquisition of real property, and that the board return to the regular meeting at 8:15 p.m. in this room. The executive session is required in order to protect the privacy interests of the individual to be discussed, to protect the district's right to the confidentiality of its negotiating position and the public interest, and to protect the district's financial interest and bargaining position.
Second.
Ms. Hibbs, we have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Ms. Ashley. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Scheer?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Belter?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Motion carries.